Hello everyone. This tutorial is going to help you to be able to understand how you can create an assessment within Blackboard. Here we are in our shell, and I have just entered the Start Here First content area, and here is my learning module. By now I'm hoping that you're feeling comfortable being able to edit the outside of your learning module, and also clicking inside to enter the learning module. You have been given this learning module to customize. So as you scroll down, you'll see that there's different items and areas that you can make your own, change the text, bring in new images, and also delete some of the items if they're not appropriate. Right here at the top, we've been using the Build Content button to create these item areas, to bring in folders. You might have brought in web links, and then also to create our learning modules. This particular button right next to it is called Assessments, and we've created an assignment in the past. Today we're going to be creating a test. Before we click on Test, I want to tell you a little bit about surveys. You can create an anonymous survey within Blackboard. The difference between a survey and a test is that a survey will not be graded. It is anonymous. You can have the same choices. Some are limited to the types of questions that you can actually set up. The point is for you to be able to survey your students. Maybe you want to check in with them, see how the final went, see how the project is going, see what you can do to help them be successful. A lot of our instructors like to use the survey at the end of the course where they're asking the students for comments and feedbacks about the course. I think a survey is also good to actually post in the middle of the class. Check in. How are you doing? What's going on? Anyway, that is something that you can do on your own if you're interested. We are going to select Test. We're going to be creating our first test from scratch in Blackboard. So you're going to come up to a screen and you're going to see Create Test. Now if you had created tests in the past, they would be listed here. We are going to be creating a new test. And one of my ideas is that if you create a test, say for example a scavenger hunt test, you can actually ask your students questions about your syllabus, about your class policies and procedures, and about some of the important things that you want students to remember. Maybe even something from your student letter of understanding if you use that for your first assignment. The goal is twofold here: to create a very short test to introduce your students to the Blackboard testing system, and two, to also maybe have them practice some of the common tools within your class. And if you are going to be doing tests, then put some of those common questions types within this test. Get them familiar. And you'll also see if they actually read the syllabus. So I've just named my test, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to fill out the description. Now I'm not going to take time in this exercise. Put a description about what the test is. Why are you administering this test? You could write something like, this test is a scavenger hunt and it's going to be based on the syllabus and about my class policies and procedures. The next part is the instructions. I might have said in past training sessions, the more instructions, the more details you provide to your students, including items like how things are going to pop up, or when you click on this link, this will open a new window. You might see some of these phrases throughout my class. It's important to be as descriptive as possible. You might here tell the students to read the syllabus first, print out the syllabus, read it, look at my policies and procedures, go through the Start Here First learning module before you take this test. Again, these are going to be important elements for your students. Once you are done, click on Submit, and it's going to take you to the test canvas. This is where you create your questions. Now we have some other options. Reuse questions. Normally we do that if we have our pool of questions maybe uploaded from a publisher's test bank, and then also if we have created questions in the past, we can go back and look for them to include in this particular test. There's a lot of functionality and options within the Blackboard's testing system. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. This upload questions happen to do if you create questions in a program called Respondus, or maybe you create your questions in a text file and you would have to know the format for that. Today we're going to concentrate on create questions. When I click on this, or I don't even have to click on it in some cases, if I move my mouse over that button, a drop-down list will appear, and these are all the question types that you have available within Blackboard. So we're going to pick one. I'm going to show you how to create a multiple choice question. It's going to open up the screen, and this is where I would actually be able to type in my question for multiple choice. Text box editor is appearing. How many hours of training are there in the cohort? Okay, so as you know, with multiple choice, you have a question, and then you have to have an answer. I can have a number of answers from 1 to hundreds. I would limit that. If I wanted the correct answer to be number 1, I could put the correct answer in here, 30 hours. And then the answer number 2, I'm going to exaggerate that because that is the incorrect answer. 3, again, I'm putting in a variety of answers. When I'm done with each of my answers, and again, if you want to denote one particular answer to be the correct one, you have to make sure the radio button is selected. As I scroll down, you're going to see that you have some options for feedback. You have options for the correct response and options for the incorrect response. That is up to you. I just want to mention that you could spend a lot of time creating these tests, these exams. You have to determine if you want to spend that time. And then I do recommend categories and keywords. I recommend at least categorizing your particular test. For example, I created a category because I've created these tests before called practice. So every question that I create in my scavenger hunt would be posted under the category practice. And then that way I can sort them later on. If I go behind the scenes to the test surveys and pools area, I would be able to see each of my categories with each of the questions within the category. All right, there's my first question that I've created. Now I do want to show you something else before we move on. There is a place up here to the very right that if you wanted questions that allowed file attachments and images, audio files and things like that, you would need to set this up beforehand. Some of you had told me that you are interested in having your students identify images and audio files. So you would want to set the test questions so you could actually include those items, and then if you had students include those items, you would have to make sure those images, files, and web links were available in the answers as well. If you were going to provide feedback, you want to provide feedback so it shows up to the individual answers. And some of these other areas you can look through, but the default is pretty good as far as what they have chosen for us. Once we're ready, we can click on Submit. And you've created some test settings. You can control your points over to the right hand side, or you can control your points if you have multiple questions And also, I might just want to go back here for just 1 minute. You can actually set your questions for each, set your points for each questions in the question setting. If I knew that each question needed to be 1 point, I could set it in the question settings area. That way it would default to 1. Oh, it didn't actually do that. Let me go back there, make sure I did that correctly. Yes, it did. I think what happened here, and I think this is good for you to see because I had already created the question and the points were assigned. It's not going to allow me to do it there, but I can come over here and I can change that to 1 point. And now from now on, every question that I actually create will be 1 point. So I hope you saw that and caught that. You can change the settings for your points in the question setting, or you can change them on the side if each of them are going to be different, or you can also change them up here in this area if each of the questions will be the same points. So it's a Tim Toady. There is more than one way to do it. All right. Again, if you're going to create another question type, you would go here to create question, and then you would be able to select that question. Now I do want to show you one more thing before we move on to the options. Remember, I went to the question settings and I set up some areas that would allow files and web links. This is where they will appear. And again, I wouldn't worry about doing that unless you're going to use that. So here's how you would apply that. If you had a web link or you had some kind of file that you wanted students to look at and then comment on whether it was true or false, multiple choice, short answer, matching, you would need to enable these options here. And that is done in the question settings button at the very top when we're back in the test canvas. I want to say something about that though before we move on. It is going to be important for you to consider file sizes. One of the great solutions that we have is to actually host your large multimedia files, whether they're videos, images, or audio, on a third-party server. So there's a lot of different ways we can do that, and I can talk to you about that if you have any questions. Some of your classmates have actually come up with some great ideas as well in the threaded discussion forums. Okay, so I'm ready to move on. I'm just pretending I've created my test. I have about 5 questions, and now I'm going to be moving on to the next screen. I'm going to select the test that I just made. You won't see this twice because I've done this several times. That's why. You're going to select it. That means you've just created it. Now we're going to deploy it to a content area, and I'm going to click on Submit once I've selected it. And another screen is going to appear where I now have an opportunity to again review my description. Now I have some options to consider: the test availability, how I want it to be added to an announcement, how many attempts, do I want to have forced completion, do you want the test to be timed, and many other options that you really need to go through very carefully to decide. Remember the feedback that you might have wanted to put in to the area for each question? This is where you can decide how it's going to be displayed, how you want the presentation of the test, and then when you're done, you're going to submit. Then you will see the test finally appear in your content area. It's going to list at the bottom, or actually in the learning module. This is where we have placed this, and then you can move this into place. Hopefully that's helped, and thank you very much.